Welcome back to Tulsa Talks Business. Today, Oscar and I are with Kyle Sullivan, founder of Unleash the Champ. We were just like pre-show chatting about your life, and you're another one of those people that like we're Facebook friends with, but we had to figure out how we were Facebook friends, and then we found the connection of you previously working with Life Church, and lots of great information and conversation there. So tell us about yourself. Who are you?
Yeah. So greatest title I get to have is husband to Ginger and dad to Piper and Bo. Moved here, I guess now 13. Yeah, this year, 25 will be 13 years with one mission, and that was to chase Ginger. After dating long distance for about 18 months, we met at an internship in college at a church, and had no intentions of being in Oklahoma more than that internship. And so moved here. We got married in 2013.
Okay.
So we've been married 11 years, together 14. And then I was a pastor for 12 years, like we talked pre-show. And we had our daughter, Piper, October of 19.
Okay.
Then the pandemic hit and everything was shut down. I was on staff at Transformation Church then, another church in the area here. And I got used to kind of the autonomy of I can get my work done in like half a day if I'm not like, can you look at this for a minute? Interrupted. And when they said, hey, we're coming back to the office, I went, y'all going back to the office. And so July 1st, 2020, started Unleash the Champ, and it's had a few iterations. But we talked pre-show, I played sports all my life. So that's kind of part of like the Unleash the Champ mantra, and champ is an acronym, and we can get into that if need be. But everything I do from a consulting standpoint with teams is sports inspired. And almost every client I have is former athletes that are in business now.
Oh, cool.
Oh, that's cool. So, all right. So where are you from then?
Louisiana.
You're from Louisiana, and then you had no intentions of here. It was Ginger from here?
Yep. She's like born and raised in Broken Arrow.
Okay.
Her entire like immediate family lives within like a 3-mile radius of each other.
I can understand
grandparents and aunts and the whole bit. And so, yeah, that was a shock, because at 18 I bounced. I moved out and said, hey, I'm spreading my wings. And so, yeah, but yeah, her whole family's here.
Had you always like planned like your degree? Were you planning to be in the church?
No, I didn't grow up in church.
So how'd you end up at Life Church initially?
So I did an internship. So we'll back up a bit. Didn't grow up in church at all.
Okay.
Had no frame of church. In the 90s and 2000s, there was a big like men's conference thing called Promise Keepers. And my dad worked with a guy that hounded him about going to this thing. My dad comes back from this conference, tells mom and I like, hey, I got saved, and we're gonna start going to church. And I'm like, when is church?
Right.
Had no frame of reference.
Right.
And he's like, oh, it's on Sundays. And I'm like, nah, Dad, that's when we watch football. Like, you're nuts. I'm like in 8th grade. I'm like, I'm not going. Well, as an 8th grader, you can probably assume who won that argument. So I started going to church.
Yep.
And hated it. Couldn't stand it. Could not stand it. All the rules and the regulations, and I could say this, and I can't say this, and I could wear this. It was just all bad for me. And so speed that up. I get into college. I get wrapped up in drugs and alcohol and partying and frat life, and I was a dealer for a while, and then I got jumped at a drug deal, and I have scars on my hand that remind me of me covering up my nose and my eyes. This dude beat the hell out of me.
Oh, wow.
The literal place I was going.
Right.
And so I called a guy at like 3 a.m. that was at the church that I respected, and I said, I need effing Jesus. I just didn't abbreviate anything. And he goes, all right, cool, come over.
Oh, wow.
So he leads me to Christ on his front porch where I'm probably smoking about a whole pack of cigarettes. And wake up the next day, I'm like, what do I do now? He's like, probably make some changes. And so I did, and dropped out of university. there, and moved out of the frat house and cut ties with all the drug stuff and started going to church for myself. And pretty quickly felt like, oh, I'm going to do this. Like, I want to be a part of this. And was a part of a great church back home, and then moved to Arkansas. It's where I went to Ouachita Baptist, and was like, okay, I'm going to be a pastor. Like, I'm going to be the pastor that I wish I had.
Right.
I'm not going to be a lame pastor.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I graduated with a Christian studies and theology degree, minor in psychology. And then I thought, I'm going to be a pastor forever. And that lasted for 12 years, and then into what I'm doing. What I'm doing now.
Being pastor, like, and obviously not a pastor, and anyone who knows me would be like, LOL. Like, I love Jesus, I cuss a lot, and I'm trying to like get it together. But I think, we go to Battle Creek now, and one of our pastors is just recently is leaving and going to do something else. And I think sometimes it just happens.
Sure.
And that's okay. That doesn't mean that you have fallen,
No.
or but I also think being a leader in the church is hard.
1,000%.
I've seen it, watched our friends, like every movement, judged and viewed. And so I can't imagine. And so I think that that's not talked about a lot. And everyone wants to have so much like input on our church leaders and how they're living, but not remembering that they have the same mercy and grace and forgiveness that we do.
For sure.
And it's wild to me, the perceptions.
Yeah. People put pastors on pedestals, forgetting that they're people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Oscar has talked about that a lot, like what he's grown up. He grew up in the Nazarene church.
Well, I always say that if you're watching a man or woman or whatever, but if you're looking at a person, people can allow God to show through them or allow God to work through them, but people are people and they're going to fail you. And when I was a kid growing up, I used to look to people that I respected and think almost, I didn't worship the people, but I almost thought I put them on such a high pedestal that when they did make a mistake, they failed me. Sure. And not even a mistake towards me necessarily, just in life, things that people go through, and then I learned as I grew up that that's human nature. That's everybody.
Oh, for sure.
It doesn't matter. Money, temptations affect everybody. Right. It doesn't matter if they're a preacher. It doesn't matter if they're in the church. It doesn't matter if they're in a place of leadership. And so I think it was a big letdown as I grew up and I saw that, but I also learned a lot from that, so.
Yeah. And that's a piece of it too, that, the stats say 50% of people who start in ministry won't retire in ministry because there is a weight to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And in some ways, rightfully so, when you are responsible for, the Bible says like teachers and preachers and apostles and prophets will be judged at a higher standard.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a weight that carries with it that is tough. And like we mentioned, when I was kind of in the peak of my ministry time, whether at Life Church, we were running 9 services a weekend.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have kids yet, Ginger and I, and so if we did have our kiddos, like that would be hard.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gone all weekend into Monday night. Like,
yeah.
And, there's seasons of that now being in the, what I do at travel, but like every single weekend, that would be a lot.
Oh yeah. Like I was thinking even this Christmas Eve when we went to church and I was trying really hard to figure out how we were going to make it to the 5:30 service for church and working around our kids' schedules. And when I was like standing there, I was looking at all of our church leadership and I thought to myself, like, these people have been here this is like their 5th service for Christmas Eve.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that everyone always stops and appreciates that.
Oh, yeah.
And that's hard. And I think it's probably hard on the other side of that. Like, I don't think that there's probably some resentment sometimes that they pray about and they're like, you're frustrated, but it's like, I was just sitting there thinking like, I was really struggling for to figure out this 5:30 service. I don't know. I think that was God working in me a little bit too, of like how much I acted like almost it was an inconvenience. It wasn't, but I was working around everybody's schedule because we have 6 kids and 4 of them are adults, and then they've got wives or girlfriends or whatever. And it's working around a lot of people. And I think God shut me down for a minute, and there was like, look at these people who've like spent all this time.
Right. 100%. When I was in ministry, everything was planned around what services we had. And again, back in that day, but we would average 14 to 16 services for Christmas Eve.
That's crazy.
Wow.
Because of the amount of people.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what are you doing now with your business?
Yeah. And how did you? So Oscar's like, and we're gonna keep going off on this forever because I can't talk about it forever.
Redirect.
He's like Cassie. He's like redirect Cassie. Well, okay, but then you left the Life Church. Yep. You were at Transformation. Yep. Then it was time to go back. You were like, I'm not doing it. So Unleash the Champ.
Yeah. Okay. So I work primarily at this point, managers, directors, supervisors, and the teams they lead. So our tenet with Unleash the Champ is help leaders know themselves so they can lead themselves first. They can lead themselves, they can lead a team. If they can lead a team, they transform an organization. So I do on and off site leadership development classes. It's the easiest way to say it.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
And so that's taken a few forms. Mm-hmm. When I first got out and started the business, I was only working one-on-one. It was more, I called myself a performance life coach. Mm-hmm. And then, 2022, I kind of went away from the term like coaching because it seemed like everybody became a coach during the pandemic. It's like, oh, you can't get a job, so I'm a coach now.
Yeah, that happened in our industry for sure.
And I'm like, what have you done?
Yeah.
And then I said, oh, because I was like, I'm going to be a business coach. And I was like, fool, you ain't even built the business. Yeah. So and then I settled on what have I done? And that's lead people. What have I done? And that's develop leaders. And so that's where the management consulting and team trainer came in.
Gotcha.
So how'd you get your first client? That's always the
grit and delusion. Just when I first started, again, July 1st, 2020, peak of the pandemic, I was prospecting and my goal was 100 conversations a day. Mm-hmm. And I did everything the first 18 months on Instagram. Mm-hmm. And so within a week, I got somebody on a Zoom call and sold them a $400 a month, $100 a week coaching, and then went from there. And then 23 was really when a shift happened. I was in a nationwide speaker competition and made the semifinals and really leveraged that to shift to the consulting and kind of leadership development training.
So your delusion is what is kind of like makes me laugh, but it's so true because if you want to be a high performer or a high producer, you have to be a little bit delusional.
For sure.
And I was actually just reading a story about the founder of Spanx. Mm-hmm. Okay. So she, back, I think it started in the late 90s, 2000s or whatever, but she founded Spanx and it was the first women's shapewear that was going to be comfortable and yada, yada, yada. But she landed Nordstrom and everyone kept saying, how did you get Nordstrom? How did you get it? And she said, I asked them. I called them. Right. Like I called and asked them, and so that's what, that's setting yourself apart and that's being different and like being delusional enough to ask. Right. Like I always joke that a little, like some of the success of our business has been that, I'm crazy enough to try things and I throw stuff at Oscar sometimes that I think a few times he's looked at me like side eye, like,
yeah, more than a few times.
Yeah. And he was maybe a little safer sometimes where I was like, what, but we also both have a little bit of a, I say like a gambling spirit or like a little bit of that. Yourself. Yeah. And so we're just like, show me I can't, prove me I'm wrong. Like, tell me I'm stupid. That's fine. And so, but that's crazy because you have to, a lot of people, when I've seen and through like Oscar and I mentor quite a few people, and we'll have conversations of, he has one guy that he's mentored quite a bit in the last year. And when we give the feedback, it's not always the feedback that he wants. And it's like, at some point you have to recognize, like, do you really want to do this? And have you had that experience with coaching someone that you're kind of like, I don't know that you're going to make it. And you don't want to say that, but you're like, how do you reshape?
I'll either say that or
you're like, yeah, maybe I will say it.
Well, I think sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, hey, if you're not willing to do X, Y, and Z, I'm not a fortune teller, but this is likely where you're heading.
You're right.
Especially with what I do with leaders and teams. Like if a leader is arrogant or isn't teachable or, like, just blames it on their team because of the turnover they have. It's like, hey, homie, like, you're the problem.
You're the problem.
Right. Like your team's not because people don't leave companies. They leave people.
Right.
Like rarely. And so I feel like the most loving thing is like, hey, if you don't change some things here, you're just going to keep having this rotating door.
Yeah. I used to be a really hostile leader. I can talk about it now. I wouldn't say I was trained that way. So my experience goes back to Best Buy. I talk a lot about on the Power Women of the Trades podcast. I haven't really talked so much about my Best Buy life on Tulsa because it's different. Like the Power Women of the Trades podcast, it's almost like I get to be in this different world. Even though I know all these people listening to me in the Tulsa podcast, I know that Tulsa people are listening, and I'm like, y'all know me on a real deep multi-level, know? So, but back in my day at Best Buy, I was trained to be a hostile leader.
Okay.
I was trained to be a hothead. My leader, that wasn't the Best Buy way. That was the leader that I had.
Sure.
The leader that was leading me, she was mean and hateful, and that's how she trained me. And so that's how she got things done, because you were scared of her. And so to some degree, that's who I became, because I thought that was the only way that I could be a female leader. And that was like, even back then would be like, you have to be this way to be a female leader. So I just bought into it. I'm like, okay, well, that's what I have to do. And so whenever coming into quality, I wasn't the best leader for a long time. I've said that a million times, that there are probably people now who listen to me speak and think, ain't no way, this girl's full of shit. Like, she was terrible as a leader. And I was. Probably 2019, I was a terrible leader. But I had to, number one, do some personal growth. I had to identify maybe what the issue was. I had to identify how to change those things, and then just start working on myself to be able to recognize or to see where we were going. Right. And I think if I wouldn't have shifted that back then, we definitely couldn't have grown. Because Oscar was never, our kids are always like, you are not the same person at work as you are at home. And he's like, yeah, because if I talk to my employees the way I talk to you, they wouldn't work for me.
She's talking about my adult children.
Yes, by the way, the adult
when we go out and we're working together on a project and they're just moping around, they're going to get it from me.
But, sure.
Yeah. He definitely doesn't talk to the little kids that way. Okay?
Right. I'm not talking to my 9-year-old the same way I'm talking to my 20-year-old, but who's running his mouth to me all the
whole time. But, like, the leadership is different. And you have to be willing to take the advice.
Absolutely. And you lead, to your point, Oscar, you lead your 9-year-old different than the 20-something.
Right.
And even with our teams, somebody that just comes into our organization, we lead differently than somebody that we've built rapport and equity and everything with.
Right.
Well, and also one thing that I remind our team all the time is a service manager might have 10 to 12 reports to them, right? Those 10 to 12 people are 10 different personalities, and you have to, just like you counsel your children or discipline your children or lead your children in different ways. Those are 10 different ways that you have to lead them, because explaining something this way to this one is not going to be as effective to this other one. We have one guy that he's like, I need you to yell at me. Like, because he came from the football world.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I need you to yell at me, and I'm not getting it unless you do. Sure. But then there's a couple others that if we had that approach,
in the corner
right, it would be like, I got to leave,
Right. I need a day.
I can't work here anymore. And so I think, but those are important. Like, we're really big on one-on-ones. And if anytime that we've had an issue, maybe with a teammate or something, I always go back to, have you had your one-on-ones?
Right.
you know,
Oh, yeah.
because you can identify a lot in someone's one-on-one.
Oh, no doubt. And I think that's the healthiest place to have some of those conversations. You know, I talk about it like you don't have conversations on the field that you would have in the locker room.
Right.
Right. You know, and understanding some of my greatest leaders that I had, I'm more like hey, I don't need the compliment sandwich. I don't need all that fluff. Like, give me the meat. Let me go home.
Yeah.
Now, my wife, on the other hand, she needs like a Panera amount of bread. On that thing. And that's okay. That's all right. If I had leaders lead my wife like they've led me, it would go sideways. Right. Quick, fast, and in a hurry. And I think that's the sign of a maturing and developing leader is knowing your tendencies and then knowing your teams. And so that's what I love to do now.
Yeah, awesome. For sure. That cracks me up in so many ways. The sandwich, the compliment sandwich, or even the constructive feedback sandwich of like, you suck here. That's the bread. Here's the meat. You're really good. Or I'm sorry, I'm doing that backwards. Here's the bread you're really great at. You suck here. Right. Okay. And then back here. And I don't necessarily use that so much anymore, but I had a meeting, me and Aspen, one of our managers, were on a conference call, and it was actually a sales pitch. And I said, I was just done with the fluff. And I said, get to the meat and potatoes, please. Like, I'm done with this. Right. And then we ended up hiring that vendor a year later. And she's like, look, throwback to the time you said the meat and potatoes. But there's just some people that don't want all that stuff. Like, just tell me what the problem is and let's move on. And you don't need to coddle me and hold me from here, you know. But some people do need that, and that's fair.
Right. And our development and growth as a leader, knowing who would need what when, that's how we really start to stack wins and success. Yep.
Do you use any like personality tests?
Absolutely.
What's your favorite?
So one I use most is called 5 Voices, and it uses the data of Myers-Briggs with language that a middle schooler could understand. And so it's really powerful. It goes through 5 voices. And so whether it's connector, guardian, nurturer, pioneer, or creative, and it gives really actionable, tangible things for teams to understand. And the teams that really adopt any personality, whether it be Myers-Briggs, Strength Finder, DISC, Enneagram, you know, some millennials really love that. And yeah, I like them all.
We use DISC at Quality, and I think that has been, especially, we don't always use that for our field team, mostly because of time, you know, because it takes a little bit of time to get it, but our office team for sure. And it's really impactful when you have a conversation. I have one story specifically where I had 2 office employees that were not necessarily like fighting, but they were getting snippy with each other. And I said, I knew one had done the DISC. And I just happened to ask, like, hey, have you ever done the DISC assessment and like a previous company or anything? She's like, yeah, I did, you know. And I said, will you bring it? And because I have a feeling that you two are the exact same. And they're both immediately like almost offended.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And I'm like, I have a feeling, and dead on, they were the exact same. And what they were annoyed in each other was their own strengths, because they knew that they were strong and they didn't need you for that. And so they were butting heads because they were annoyed at their own personal strengths. And so I remember that now, and one of those ladies is still here. And I remember like the look in her face, and I think it changed her as a leader that day, because she was like, this is really important stuff. This is really like catching on. And so she uses those things still to this day, but it's wild when you get that. Or whenever, you know, even our dispatchers now, I can tell you like the D personality is a great dispatcher, because they're going to be more like, no, this is what you got to do.
Yeah, you got to get on it.
You're not going to talk me out of this service call, you know, because sometimes a tech will try that, right? Oscar knows nothing about that, right? We'll be like, Oscar, this technician's trying to not do this call. But, you know, we've definitely hired an I for a dispatcher, and that didn't mean that she wasn't going to be great. we just had to focus more on her training to make her great at her job.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
I would seriously, like, if you're not using an assessment in your business for your team, you should definitely consider that, because the insight that you can get from it.
Oh, for sure.
It's wild. So now, is it just, do you still do all the coaching?
Mm-hmm.
How is that?
I love it.
You feel like you're running crazy all the time?
I do. I do. In 25, I plan to add 1 to 3.
Yeah.
A target is to have some tiers of folks that can go out and start fulfilling business.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, business owners, I'm like,
yeah,
it's my baby.
Well, yeah, it is,
but it's necessary.
You can definitely teach them your philosophy, like your way.
Yeah.
You know, it's teachable.
I look at it. I go, I have a 3 and a 5-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be more available.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a sprint of sorts, first 4.5 years, and I started this. I mean, we all business owners are like, oh, freedom. It's like, well, you got to earn freedom.
Mm-hmm. What's freedom? Actually,
you got to earn the right to have flexibility.
Yeah.
And, that's probably one of the lessons that hit me in the face.
Yeah.
Like, I got all this time and I ain't got no money.
Yeah.
And so I think it's been really fun process. I say, people are like, oh, how's it going? I'm like, it's the most fun and frustrating thing I've ever done in my life.
Mm-hmm. And you're slam jammed all the time, like I said something once, and hopefully I can remember how I said it, but like, everyone's chasing the American dream, and the American dream was supposed to be this, right? Owning your own business and doing this and freedom and having more time. And you need to, like, if owning your own business to you think it's going to be time freedom, you probably just need to back up and reframe. Now, your freedom will be, you get to choose when you are working,
right?
But you need to just go ahead and assume that you're working 15 hours a day,
right?
7 days a week. Yeah.
What's that quote? I'd rather work 80 hours a week for myself, so I don't have to work 40 hours a week for somebody else. Like those of us that are crazy and own and run businesses, like that's how we think. But there's also a vast majority of people that love to work their 40, and we need those folks.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I think, even just right now through the holidays with Oscar and I, we're 10 years into this, and we think all the time, when does the freedom come? And I don't think that for us, we had to reframe what that looked like. It's not, the freedom is there to some degree, but Christmas Day, we're still picking up pieces to make sure our team can have a Christmas.
Right.
Christmas Day, awesome. We're still answering questions, and literally we try our hardest. I keep hitting this microphone. We're a home service business, so we're going to people's houses because things are broke.
Right.
And it normally, like, the things that break in your life are normally going to break when you have a house full of people or something dramatic, and so we get really busy on those holidays. But we try really hard to stay off, but it doesn't always work that way. So it allows or relies on us being the ones to pick up those pieces. And I don't know. It's definitely one of those things that you have to have your mind right.
Oh, for sure.
I never want to be discouraging about business, but you have to have your mind right about what business means.
1000%. Yeah, you said it perfectly. No,
you have to have your mind right, because there's people I've talked to. I'm like, you don't know. I wish I could tell you without making it sounding discouraging.
Always hindsight's 20. I wouldn't have probably gone from ministry to working with somebody to learn business to starting my own. I'm grateful for the path I took. Like, I had the thought, I put in my 2 weeks the next day. 2 weeks later, I had started a business.
Was Ginger like, what are you doing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Short answer, yes. But she ride or die. It's amazing. So they tell us that I get this prompting feeling, not to over spiritualize things. I just like, you're not going back. It's pandemic. So she's in our bedroom working. I'm in our spare room working. Our daughter's 4 months old in the living room with Mimi. And so I text her and say, hey, are you in a meeting? She said, no. I said, hey, come here. And I said, hey, I think I'm supposed to quit my job. And like, I ripped the Band-Aid. Again, no bread, all meat. And she's like, oh, I don't know about you, Oscar. Like, when Ginger gets a couple octaves higher, I choose my next words carefully. And she's like, well, what are you going to do? And I just kind of word vomit this whole like vision. And again, I'm a speaker. I've been on stage. Like, I can sell a thing. Right. And she goes, okay, I trust you. She didn't say she liked it.
Yeah.
She didn't say she was for it. She said yes and I do to a guy who promised her, I'm going to be a pastor forever. And now I'm going to cut 70 because I probably made up 70% of our monthly income. We got 4-month-old. And she like,
you're like,
like looking back, I'm like, I probably could have planned a little bit better for that. But I'm an ID on disc. So
I'm a DI.
Okay. And so it's like, once I have an idea, like, man, I want to run. And so she has maintained the I trust you. And I said, man, that's all I need. I don't need you to buy into it right now. There's nothing to buy into.
Yeah.
So you said hindsight, you wouldn't have done
I think I could have learned a whole lot more if I'd have just gone and got into a business job and learned business from people and
dip your toes in the water a little bit before you just
I think
all the way in.
Like Gary Vee talks about all the time, like the greatest role that you can work into is number 2. You get to learn the things without having the weight. And
we love some Gary Vee around here.
And so like I did that in ministry where I worked my way up to being the number 2 at a campus and having the staff development and the team development and budgets and things, but I didn't have the weight of being the campus pastor.
Right.
I probably could have circumvented a lot of frustration and pain, but then would I be where I'm at today? Like you play this deal. And so to your point, when people are like, I want to start a business, I'm like, do you now?
Yeah, but I still think about it's like, do you? Because like I said, I'm a mama bear at heart, and so I want to protect people, and I definitely don't want to discourage someone to do something. But Oscar and I all the time, someone asked me, one of our great friends, Texas, owns a heat and air company in Texas, and he said, we asked him on the Power Woman podcast, would you do it again? And he said no. And I was like, and I started crying in this podcast, and I'm not an emotion shower. And I was like, what? Like, and it was the first time I felt like he gave us permission to say no to if we wanted to,
sure.
Because yes, like we're thankful and we're proud and we're so excited and quality is everything. And we're thankful of where it's been. But if you could have lived the last 10 years with us, we've sacrificed a lot. Our children have sacrificed a lot. I mean, you just came in here to podcast today, and our daughter's in the room next door. This episode will air in January, but it's Christmas break, and she's spent she's a shop baby. She was born in this company, not this building. She spent her time here. Which is great. That's a nice luxury, but she doesn't have Christmas breaks and fall breaks and things. She's at work quality.
Right.
She's not sleeping in, she's at quality. And so it's like, how much have my kids sacrificed for us to build the business, which in the long run, we tell them all the time, like, this hopefully will be for the future of, we ain't leaving this company to them. I'm putting that on record. Yeah. We're always like, no. But it's not been like this glitz and glam. We only show that on Facebook.
Sure.
We ain't going to show you the real rough.
Right.
No one is,
Yeah. And I love that, sometimes we need the permission and the space to say things because everybody, you ask that question. Yeah, 100%. I would do it all again. Yeah, man, I love that. It was like, no, I'm good. I'd not do that.
Yeah.
And, there's videos that I've recorded in the darkest of those moments over the last 4.5 years that I'm like, I'm gonna show one day. I'm gonna show one day. But yeah, it's not for the faint at heart, and it sounds great on a coffee mug, but like it really is a weight that very few people get the opportunity to bear.
Yeah. And if you do, I hope if anyone's listening, you don't take what we're saying as discouragement. Hopefully it's encouraging to you that maybe if you're in the trenches right now, that it's okay. Like we've all been there, and it's not always like puppies and rainbows and glitz and glam. And it's
if you don't
hard.
go through the valleys, you won't make it to the top of the mountains. So.
Yeah.
That's for sure. So,
and I think in some way, if you hear this and you're discouraged to not start, you probably shouldn't start.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I got told all the war stories.
Yeah.
I got told, man, it's going to take 5 years before you really like catch some traction. And I'm like, you don't know me.
Yeah.
Like I took it as a challenge.
Yeah. And now you're here almost 5 years and you're like, they're right. Yeah. Wait until you get to 10 years. Yeah, that's where we're at now, 10 years. And it's like, they always say like 5 years is where, make or break you. And that's true. Sure. And like that 5 year mark, I was like, ooh, yeah. No, but it's just like, I think we live it in fives.
Sure.
Because we've hit that 10 year and we've hit like this, like not comfortable, but like, because we're still growing. And with us, we're growing by staff. And man, wait till you're managing 65 people, 65 personalities, So
yeah, so I had coaches that, I mean, they'd make practice hard to try to run people off.
Mm-hmm.
So you got another personality of the person or whatever. But again, I think sometimes some of the most loving thing we say is to talk about how hard something would be.
Mm-hmm.
I still get to do a couple weddings a year, and I love that, walking through couples with premarital things and doing a ceremony, and I was like, hey, marriage is hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a dummy.
Mm-hmm.
Like I literally told the guy doing our wedding I had no expectations of my wife. I'm like, she's awesome, this is gonna be great.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes, back to what we said at the beginning, sometimes the most loving or great thing we can say is, here's the upside, but here's the valley.
Yeah.
Take it, leave it.
There's way more valleys than
for sure
peaks, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, it's been really great chatting with you.
Yeah, no doubt.
If someone wanted to get in touch with you for coaching, or anything, how would they do that?
Yeah, unleashthechamp.com is the hub.
Sweet.
And I have a free downloadable deal like most websites, but you can do the free 5 Voices assessment, kind of a 40,000 foot view of kind of my Keystone program. And so they give you a couple page printout. It takes about 15 minutes, 80 questions. And like I said, data of Myers-Briggs, but with easily understandable language.
I like it. That's cool. Well, thanks for hanging out with us
Absolutely.
today.
This is awesome.
We look forward to seeing you continue to grow and what comes from Unleash the Champ.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you guys.
Appreciate it.
No doubt.